Obviously, there are older leaders who are great and younger ones who are not, but I would say, generally speaking, most of the folks who are shitting the bed in this moment are people who've been in politics for a while, who've been a little bit older, who don't know how to wield the attention economy in the same way, and most of the ones who do are younger. They've came of age in politics in the last 10 years since Trump.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Perry Bacon. I'm the host of New Republics Right Now, our twice weekly show on politics and policy. I'm joined by two great guests today. The first is Amanda Litman, who runs a group called Run for Something, which is encouraging and successfully encouraging younger people across the country to run for office, a great cause. And I'm also joined by Elliott Morris, who is a journalist who specializes in data, democracy, and politics. He has a great newsletter called Strength in Numbers that I recommend people check out. Welcome to you both.
Hi, good morning.
So I'm going to try something a little bit that I haven't done before in my 5 weeks of this. Which I'm going to sort of I'm going to give some takes, like a little bit like we're doing a goofy sports show, but it's going to be serious. And then I'm going to give some kind of views that I think I have or I'm thinking out loud about, and I want you to respond to them. And I want you to sort of feel free to disagree because I think there are things you might disagree with. And also the rule might be if the person I called on sort of first says 88% of what you were going to say, then you can just say, I agree with them. We'll move to the next thing, just so we don't have a lot of repetition here. So I'm going to start with Elliott, and I'll give my premise here, which is that normatively, I don't love when the National Guard is called into a city or someone is deported illegally and Democratic leadership says, it's a distraction, it's a stunt, and goes back to annoying talking points and sort of makes it seem like authoritarianism is not that serious. But when I look at the data, it does suggest that Donald Trump is becoming more unpopular. His poll numbers are pretty bad. I think Elliott and others have analyzed it, suggest that the Democrats are likely to win in the midterms. So is it possible that the Democratic leadership strategy, while maybe morally, normatively problematic, to, at least to me, is the correct political strategy for right now? I'll start with Elliott.
Is it possible that the Democratic leadership strategy right now is the correct one? Sure. Yeah. It's the question of like if they pushed hard. Well, you don't get to observe the counterfactual, right? So if they pushed harder, would Donald Trump be like a little bit more unpopular? Maybe.
Or a little less, or a little more popular, I guess, would be the counter argument, right? If they sounded more liberal, maybe it helps him, is what I think the subtext here is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like most Americans are not getting their message about what's happening for politics from Hakeem Jeffries. They're getting it from like the images that they see on TV or more relevant to politics today, their phone. And like images of citizens being deported, to use your example, troops in streets for the most part doing nothing, are not necessarily evidently resonating with people. And so I think like they're probably viewing politics through a more, I hate to say it, normie lens than the one that we view politics through.
Let me press you and say, if Hakeem Jeffries, the black person who runs the House Democratic Caucus, was going around saying the National Guard being in D.C. is bad, standing beside Muriel Bowser, making it a political, partisan, cultural point, would that help Donald Trump?
I would say probably on balance would not be as good for the Democrats as the position they're in right now.
Okay.
But now we're like in speculation territory.
Okay,
So
that's what but I think but their strategy seems to be based on speculation, is my guess. So, Amanda?
I think it doesn't really matter what Democratic leadership does symbolically because most of them can't break through in the attention ecosystem. So, like, they're saying it's a distraction, but nobody hears that, so who cares what they say?
Okay.
I agree with Elliott. I think what's making Trump unpopular is the fact that I see going viral on my For You page all the time videos of like moms with their coffee and their Lululemon leggings. I say that being one of those, screaming at people getting abducted on the streets of LA and DC.
So, what do you think about the distraction message normatively? Do you find it problematic, or you don't think
Oh,
it's
I do. I mean, it's not a distraction. It's the thing.
okay?
And like it is part and parcel of a larger story. It is as bad as what they're doing to the economy.
Okay. Second point I'll make. Second, we're gonna move from that to the second argument. Okay. So we had an election in New York City,
Mm.
And we had a primary, a Democratic primary in New York City. A compelling candidate won, Mamdani. That everybody has now written all these pieces saying the Democrats should follow this. Is it possible that just one person won one primary in New York City? They beat a fatally flawed nominee who was accused of sexually harassing lots of people. Is it possible there is very, very little to learn from this race beyond hope to run against Andrew Cuomo in New York and be good looking and charismatic ideally? Is it possible this is one race that and the media is all in New York and we should ignore most of what it says beyond Mondami is a better candidate than Andrew Cuomo? Amanda.
No, I think there's actually a lot to learn from Mamdani's race. Um, a few things. One, we had more than 10,000 people sign up to run for office after he won. That's a huge wave of people who are inspired by him to take further action and who are looking to his campaign as a model. So, if anything, like that is a meaningful thing. The second is that even if you're not ideologically aligned with him, the way that he campaigned of really values first, voters first, affordability, clear messaging, repetition, joyfully, like he really seems to love New York. And I think we see a lot of candidates um, try and create fear around the city that they're like trying to lead or the place they're trying to lead, like make it scary. He made it fun and delightful. I think that's really powerful. And he really kept it hyper focused on local issues. I think the more like they tried to pull him out to other stuff. He kept it focused on cost of groceries, cost of transportation, cost of housing. That stuff is like the quality of life shit that the more candidates can focus on, the more they can keep it hyper local, the better. So I'm not saying like every candidate needs to run like a candidate for mayor of New York City. They shouldn't if they're not running for mayor of New York City. But there is a lot to learn in how he approached this race and how he thought about it that I think other candidates can take their cues from.
Let me follow up a couple things you said there. Okay, so I think, Zohran ran as loving New York City. I got the sense Kamala Harris loved America because she said so every time she could. She stood beside 97 flags every time she spoke. She downplayed racism in ways that I thought were insane, but she was trying to show that she loved America. So that, and also you said it was important to focus on local issues, but isn't that part of my question here is we can't, I'm asking, is there any national, if focus on your local community is great advice, that can't be great advice for the National Democratic Party, right?
Well, it can because the National Democratic Party is made up of candidates running for local offices.
That's correct.
And I think like Kamala did a good job of it, but her campaign it got less fun over time. I think that was part of it is like the more that it became about, campaigning with Liz Cheney and like some of the more like the most lethal military force in the country, like that's not fun. That's not joyful. That's not a good party. I think that made it really hard.
Elliot, what do you think? Are you closer to where I am? This is not much we learned from this.
So I think what Amanda said was correct, and I think what you're getting at is correct. There's something to a candidate who is a very good fit for the jurisdiction they're running in, and it seems like Mamdani is that, and that's why he's likely to win, I think. But the second order question, can the Democratic Party learn a whole lot from that? Or maybe I would say is the media like interpreting that too much and trying to come up with too many prescriptions? I would say, yeah. I mean, like if Brad Lander won, Brad Lander would be maybe we could argue a less good fit for New York City Democratic primary voters. But the entire story of national politics today would be about how we need to like a Brad Landerification of the Democratic Party based on the one race. So I think I'm probably with both. I'm probably with both of you here.
Okay. My third premise. Okay, so a lot of my friends, a lot of people I respect will say the tension in the Democratic Party is not about ideology. They say it's about age and it's about whether you're willing to fight or not. And so, and the tension is between the Democratic leadership is folding and they don't, and then there's fighters like, and we can name, and AOC is a fighter, Mondani's a fighter. We can talk, Bernie Sanders is a fighter, but Adam Schiff is a fighter, but Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer are not fighters. And then there are people, and I think Amanda's a group who talk about this age difference. And there's an older generation who's like stuck in their ways and the younger generation. That is not what I see. When I want to find a non-fighting, blah, 1997 style Democratic statement, I look for Alyssa Slotkin's Twitter page because she will come up with exactly what Bill Clinton would have said, and she, I think, is 45. And so I view the divided Democratic Party as very much about ideology, like the indivisible people who are leading the fight wing. If you listen to them in 2019, they favored Warren over Biden. Like, in a certain way, I want to say, can we just be honest about it? The young people, the fighting group, are more likely to be quote unquote progressive. The less fight, older group is more likely to be quote unquote centrist, and it might just and I think we are still on some level having the same ideological fight we've been having for a long time, and that is the real question here. I think Amanda might disagree, so I want to hear what she thinks.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there's certainly older leaders who can fight and certainly younger ones who cannot. But I think generational divide is like a way to shortcut for a bunch of things of when you came of age in politics, of how you understand the Republican Party. Are they good faith operators or are they trying to burn it down? Of how you engage in communication tactics. Often it's a shortcut to account for class and like the way that you understand class politics and whether you're working class and have access to wealth or not. Obviously, there are older leaders who are great and younger ones who are not. But I would say, generally speaking, most of the folks who are shitting the bed in this moment are people who've been in politics for a while, who've been a little bit older, who don't know how to wield the attention economy in the same way. And most of the ones who do are younger. They've came of age in politics in the last 10 years since Trump. And actually, I would add another dimension to the sort of fight, which is it fight and transform? Like, do you want to both fight the Republican Party and then transform these institutions that have failed to serve us? Or do you want to fold and return? Fold to the Republican Party and then return to the norms that we've had before. Like that, I think, is actually sort of the quadrants that we are currently at. And I would say, like, maybe Alyssa Slotkin is more of the fight, but then return. And you've got someone like AOC or like Mamdani who's fight and transform. And that, I think, is more of the axis we're on at the moment.
What do you think, Elliott?
I'm all in when someone starts putting things on quadrants for me. That's great. Look, I think there's like a very classic political science answer to this question. I hate to be that guy, but
For this.
I have to. I'm going to put that hat on. There is a divide in politics that manifests itself among the masses, among voters, and there's a divide that happens among elites. And I think there's probably another thing that's going on here. Not to disagree with Amanda, is that there's a divide with the elites that gets covered in the media, and that is the fight versus I guess fawn framing. And then there's another divide among voters, especially among general election voters, that is less attuned to the fights going on the elite level of the party and much more about your traditional, I hate to call it left-right ideology, but the traditional ideological components that Perry's bringing up. So if we're talking about the divide in the party, capital P, the one that we interface with as elites in the media, then it's going to be like we're going to be more steered by this like non-ideological component of conflict for the party. And if we're talking more about like what's going to cause people to actually change their votes, then I would say it's much more ideological, and the causation would go from progressivism probably towards your orientation toward fighting, as you brought up.
You both have mentioned the attention economy, both in this question and the first question. And I guess when I hear that, I'm not sure. Like, we don't actually think Mamdani won the primary because he's better at viral video than Cuomo. Do we think that is, or do we? Like, when we say attention economy, are we literally saying that politics is now about who uses YouTube? Would that be very reductive? Who uses YouTube video better, or what are we really saying when we say that?
I think Mamdani won because he had viral videos that were talking about something that really mattered to people's lives. Like, it's
Okay.
not that they were fun or engaging. I mean, they were, but the substance of them, which was talking about cost of housing, cost of childcare, cost of transportation, the fact that he was able to make that so compelling that it broke through.
Okay.
Like, that I think is what matters.
Okay, so I said viral video. Video doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
work.
but like
Viral video inherently. Okay, that's a dumb
it's
way to
the
frame it.
fact that it
But yeah,
gets attention. Because like what
okay.
is an election but trying to use attention to move people to action in the same way that like an influencer or a content creator tries to, create compelling content to move people to, buy a thing, cyberbully someone on the internet, whatever, like engage in in some kind of action. That's what a candidate campaign is at this point. And everything that they're doing, all the tactics, the videos, the ads, the campaign events, the rallies, even the door knocking, it's the same theory, even if it feels kind of different in some
Because I
ways.
see all these Democratic congressmen like doing video in their car, or because they're
Mhm.
trying to stimulate something, and I'm sort of like, and you look at then I look at the video audience numbers, and it's like, well, the speaker or the House Minority Leader got 300,000 views. I'm guessing some kid in my neighborhood could have hit that too. So I feels like we mean attention economy does not mean use new media in a boring way, Elliot, or whatever. What am I trying? The video needs to go viral is the key thing here.
Yeah, I think the thing you're tapping into is the authenticity of the candidate. Like, it would not work if Cuomo was trying to make these viral videos in a wetsuit on Coney Island, like, because it would have just been, well, quite disgusting, probably in one sense. And that's why like a 70-year-old politician making a TikTok in their car doesn't resonate as much either. Because it doesn't feel authentic. People need to, as much as our modern economy is about attention, it's also about parasocial relationships, and
Mhm.
people have developed those with their Congress people. I think, in order to develop those relationships, you have to like actually be, have to be a person, and so that gives way to a type of politics that's different than the one you had when the only media attention you got was from a debate on TV or the TV ads you were spending millions of dollars on, or maybe in the very off case that you ran into a constituent at a actual event in real life.
I mean, it's the
It makes
same
me
thing. It's just to say it's the same thing that's happening in media, where people are drawn to personalities, to creators, to journalists, not necessarily to institutions. It's the same thing that's happening in politics, where you may not like the Democratic Party, but you like Zohran Mamdani, who's running as a Democrat. You like AOC, who's running as a Democrat. And you appeal to people vote for people. Like literally, you vote for the person who has the lived experience and the story and the communication skills and the values. And if you know them as a person, you don't actually have to agree with them on every policy to still align with them politically.
So I guess the example I'm thinking of now, because based on something Elliot wrote earlier in the year, was I don't like I lived in Washington D.C. for a long time and worked in politics, so I knew who Chris Van Hollen was. But
Mhm.
my friends are now asking why won't Chris Van Hollen run for president? And I think, and he's old and dull in a certain way. But I think what they're responding to is Chris Van Hollen went to El Salvador and did something they remember, and that's kind of, and he captured their attention in a way, which I think is what, and that's the part where, because Elliott was arguing like early in the year, immigration is not this issue Democrats should be afraid of, but in fact an issue where the poll numbers can change. And Elliott looks like a genius because we are now seeing polls everywhere suggesting that the American public's views on immigration have changed.
Is that a question to me? So
You could,
as a
if you want to
response, I
add to
would
what he
say,
said, I
as
pretty
a
much did
response, I would
summarize your
say
views, but yeah.
I'm not a genius. I would say that as my first part of my response. It's very easy to see these sorts of things coming, but yeah, like well, the only preparation I did for this was I looked at some Pew numbers. 70% of Democrats today say they want Democrats to compromise less and stand up for their values, which is the highest level that number's ever been.
Oh wow.
And it used to be less than Republicans. Now Republicans are likelier to say they'd rather have their leader compromised than stick up for the things that they believe in. It's still like a 60-40 split, but they're relatively more likely than Democrats to support compromise. And so when you're yeah, I just when you're in that like opposition mindset, maybe could be our theory. You like really want a party to stick up for you because they understand they might not be getting the policy they want out of Washington, so they really want to feel like they are having that that legislator like representing their interests. And maybe in this case, Chris Van Hollen's like not a very slick looking guy, but he has a video that's resonating with him, I would guess. I kind of like the guy personally, but I have a pretty dry sense of humor, so that's probably where that comes from.
Let me move my fourth premise. Polls. We should look at polls lists, and I'll start with Elliot on this one. Obviously, um, I guess I have two comments. The first might be, we're all now saying it is terrible that the National Guard going into DC is bad, and polls show it's unpopular with the public. Well, I would have thought the National Guard going to DC was bad, even if it polled in the '80s. I don't. I mean, I'm leery. I'm a little bit nervous, and I guess two things. One is we don't want polls to dictate how we view the world. I don't know what Jim Crow polled in Alabama in 1930, but my guess is the number might have been somewhat higher than I'd like it to be. We don't want that. And then two, since we have a lame duck president running as behaving as an authoritarian, do we look at his approval ratings each day? Do they matter? He doesn't care. He's not running for reelection. I mean, I don't. So talk to me about why I should be reading poll numbers about approval ratings and about his actions, since those don't have any. Those aren't really self-actualizing.
For me. So three things. So first off, I think he actually does care about his approval rating, or at least he cares about seeming to be popular if he doesn't care about the actual number itself. And he's citing these ratings constantly, making up numbers now because he doesn't have the numbers in the actual public. So it's not obvious to me that he doesn't actually care about his popularity and that he wouldn't change his course. I mean, and one example of this is the administration did change its course in 2018 in response to public opinion on family separations. That was a pretty big firestorm. So I think like Trump 2 is not Trump 1. Maybe he cares less. I would buy that. We can go around that. But the bigger issue is why should you care about polls? Well, because we live in a democracy, and what the people think matter. That doesn't mean you should be prescriptive about every single policy based on like one or two polls. And I think, and I've written about this, there's a tendency to deliver a very shallow reading of the polls today, especially in one side of the Democratic political spectrum. And that is particularly damaging, not because of the ideological content or the polls itself, but just because of the lazy polling analysis people are doing. So when you say, "Oh, the polls say this, Democrats should do that," without acknowledging that the opinion might change, that's just like bad strategy, regardless of the thing you're anchoring it to. In this case, being the polls. So, I'm going to put on my author hat here and say the case I make in my book is that politicians should make decisions with a variety of inputs, polls being one of those inputs, but not the only one.
Amanda.
I think that last point is one of the most important, in particular, and as we were talking about earlier, the need to be authentic. It is the tension is between saying what you actually believe and what you truly are mad about, what reflects your values, and what the polls may direct you towards. And I want candidates who are strategic, but I also want them to be themselves. So I think that that rub of like, well, actually, if the thing you're really mad at, I think this is where Van Hollen's move going to El Salvador was really powerful. It's because like it clearly fired him up. It wasn't poll driven. It was genuine fury on what was happening. That's the kind of thing that breaks through and then can affect poll numbers, which is a useful like thermometer, but it shouldn't be the thermostat.
So last thing, I don't know if Elliott has written a full piece about this, but he had this idea that that the Democratic Party is suffering from nationalization. So
Mhm.
the idea would be to have instead of the you might have a DNC every 4 years, but you also might have every couple of years sort of a regional the Democrats of the South should have a convention. The Democrats of the North or the Northwest should have a convention. And so therefore you reinforce these, and maybe at the South when Andy Beshear and Roy Cooper talk, and it reinforces this sort of Southern Democrat, which is maybe different, more Christian, more culturally conservative. We can debate what that looks like. And having sort of 9 or 7 regional conventions might help the party. So I wanted to hear, and so I was curious if Elliott thinks, A, does that actually help the Democratic Party as a whole? And then B, should the Republicans be doing that in the Northeast or the West to make sure the California Republicans not tagged with Trump? Is nationalism a problem for both parties or just the Democratic Party? And just sort of explore that idea a little bit. I'm sort of dubious it'll really work, but I thought it was interesting. It was like the one thing I hadn't heard from anybody recently. So Elliot first, and then Amanda hopefully respond to it.
Yeah, so I don't know if it'll work, but I think Democrats probably need to be trying everything they can to be creative in this way. So, the idea here is like, if you're the party that gets drawn out of representation in congressional redistricting, for example, because all your voters are clustered in cities, and you have a popular majority in the polls, and a numerical majority in things like the popular vote, but your coalition is so concentrated that you can't win power in geographic systems of representation, then you need to do something to win other voters, even though that you're at a disadvantage. In this case, that's the Democratic Democrats today. And in most democracies, it's the left-leaning party, but it doesn't have anything to do about Democratic versus Republican. It just how happens to be Democrats today. So this is a problem for Democrats, especially now because they can't win in places that are really rural, and we have a Senate. So they are going to have to compete in the Senate. Like, there's all these short-term problems we've been talking about so far, and the long-term problem is that Democrats are going to be locked out of power in the Senate in like five or six cycles. Perhaps even a filibuster-proof majority for Republicans in the like doom scenario. So they have to do something about that. The way you do that is to like incentivize independents to run by not standing candidates in places like Nebraska, or fully decentralizing the image of your party. Again, somehow, I don't think anyone knows what that is, but you have to be bold, and regional conventions are one way to do it. The
In other
other
words,
counter.
the convention is like Montana, Kansas, that whole middle of the country where there's all these Senate races where the Democrats lose by 1,000 points. That would be the Democratic Party. We should call it the Free Soil. Wrong term. Pick a whatever that party is called.
Yeah,
Don't
don't
use
call
that
it
word.
that.
But whatever that term is, that's a regional party that exists
I would
in
say,
Canada. Yeah.
you want to think even smaller. Like Montana and Kansas are really different. You might want to have like a Mountain West Democratic
Okay.
Party convention, and then like a Central Plains and a Midwest or what have you. And you just like you highlight the candidates that are really popular in that area. Maybe in your Kansas, Iowa, whatever collaborative Democratic Party caucus, you have this state legislator Dre, who just won her special election last 2 weeks ago. Time is a weird circle.
Sure.
And then people start to associate the party brand with people in their local community, not like who are really far away and might not share their values.
Isn't the
Again,
Republican
just an
running going to
idea.
say Laura Kelly is just an imitation? Laura Kelly is the governor of Kansas. Is just an imitation of AOC. I mean, Hattie isn't the national. Like at the end of the day, you're going to say you're still saying I'm a Democrat, and you're still going to have Mamdani running in New York. What? How does that avoid the? You think it just lessens? You think it just lessens it? Is that your point?
I think it's a creative thing they should try. They're going to run
You're
into the
not
bigger
promising.
problem.
Okay.
They're going to run into the bigger problem, which is that party images are really like established by media and social media coverage. So, that's probably the larger effect here. But like having an extra Democratic National Convention where you're highlighting all the figures of Democratic Party politics over the last like 60 years is probably not a good idea, I would think.
Because I guess Martin. I mean, the Ken Martin is going to have a new convention. Is that what the? Is that what this? How this was
Right.
planned?
That's what started the entire
Yeah.
the entire discussion.
Okay, Amanda.
I wouldn't do regional conventions. I would build up individual profiles as much as you can. Like, don't make it about the Democratic Party at all. Make it about the person. Make it about James Tellerico and Mallory McMorrow and, the woman who just announced she's running for Senate in Florida today, Jennifer Jenkins, and make it about Graham Plattner. Like, they are the local leaders who can rise up and like define the brand. And yeah, they happen to be Democrats, but that's the least interesting thing about them. I would prioritize the people, not the party convention, or like put it under the party brand, because you
You.
want
Uh-huh.
the rest of that. They can bring out other voters. I think in states like, Montana or Idaho, or even places like Louisiana or Mississippi, one of the things Run for Something is really thinking about long term is post 2032, where could the battlegrounds be? And where are the places where we today need to be fielding as many local candidates as we can to build a bench of talent for those places to try and win back at the city, county, municipal, school board level, knowing that ultimately that's the only way we're going to be able to win by the margins in some of these places. Can we give the Democratic Party a different face in those places? And can we make them compelling enough that that their personal brand overcomes the toxicity of the party brand?
You
That's what.
said a couple different ways, and I'm thinking about this now. That candidates and the individual races. I am focused on the national brand of the party
Yeah.
because that's what media focuses on, so on and so on. But I think your point is even the presidential race is not. You don't vote for the Democratic brand. You vote for Barack Obama or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. So is your point that this sort of party brand question might actually not? You're not quite saying this, but is this party brand question maybe less important than maybe this given? Particularly in sort of like candidates winning rate. Yeah, this party brand question maybe not that important actually.
I just think it's fading the way that people's relationships to institutions
Okay,
is changing. And I think in particular, like think about what's going to happen to the Republican Party when Trump is no longer on the ballot, which he will not be again. That coalition is going to crumble because none of those individuals, JD Vance is not going to walk into that primary without a fight. Marco Rubio doesn't have the juice. Like one of those his numbnut sons is going to run. Kristi Noem is going to run. Like which person can hold that coalition together? I think it's going to be its own clusterfuck. And the Republican brand is actually no different than the Trump brand at this point. So how are they going to navigate that while we are trying to redefine what the party means is, I think, really the question of the next couple of years.
Follow up to ask the question. Okay, so the Republican Party brand will probably win in Alabama. Your point is, though, in a national election,
Yeah.
once Trump is gone, they have to read the
They're
question
going to
for
have
them
to
is the
go.
same as okay. I see.
They're going to have to go through a full rebranding exercise the way the Democrats had to do after Obama. And we saw how that works. It doesn't go that well when you don't have the unifying figure who can bring together unique parts of the coalition you need. I'm not saying that means the Democrats will absolutely win. You need a person on the other side who can be that unifying figure. But especially when you think about congressional races, local races, state legislative stuff, yeah, party is a heuristic that people use when they go to the polls if they're not quite sure who to vote for. But ideally, we can empower candidates to have enough of a personal relationship with voters that they can supersede the party brand. I also think on a more practical level, there's not gonna be money for any of that shit. So it's sort of a silly, I mean, it's not a silly hypothetical. All hypotheticals are worth exploring, but there's not gonna be money for that stuff.
I assume Elliott, I guess I'll be honest, will end here is I like institutions. I like the idea of a party representing in the same way that I like the New York Times that it exists, even if I have concerns about what it does. So I think in a certain way, I probably prefer a more institutionalized solution because right now, all of my friends, anytime Gavin Newsom does something good, they're like, I will not vote for him in 2028. And it's like, because he did his thing, it's like, are we always there? Is every moment part of the 2028 primary? My worry is if candidates matter, which I agree with, but doesn't that make every day part of the 2028 Democratic primary, which is not helpful, I would argue, in this? We're trying to fight fascism. Can we debate whether Andy Bashir or Pritzker or Newsom or AOC is better in December 2027? And my answer to the question, I was like, yes, but you're hinting that these individuals matter so much that maybe we should be debating the individual merits all the time. That was a
Hey,
question, I think. Go ahead, Amanda. I guess I was sort of like, does it take us into this primary territory? I guess the question I'll finish with is, Amanda, does it take us too much into this primary? The individualization has some negatives, and then for Elliott, do we think parties' brands still should matter, even if they maybe don't matter?
I don't think is it good? No, probably not. But it's where we are. It's sort of where we are. And I do think one of the things that the pundit class, the chattering class, we actually have to actively refrain ourselves from applying everything through the lens of the 28 primary.
Okay.
That's on us. That's our responsibility.
Well, my friends are doing it now. It's not just I would
But
actually argue it's not
we got to
just
pull them back, and that's
yeah.
the thing for the elites to be like, no, it's about part of the reason that being able to wield attention right now matters is because we want to set the narrative playing ground that the 2026 midterms will be on. So the more that you have people right now who can break through and talk about fighting and actually wield power in any meaningful way or can make it about the issues we want the 2026 election to be about, the better. That's what the attention matters for this moment. And that's why conflict gets attention. So that's why fighting is it was one of the reasons why, along with morally, it's why it's so important in this moment.
Okay, Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, House elections now are predicted by previous presidential performance in a district more than they've ever been before. There's fewer crossover districts than there's ever been. So that tells me that how people feel about presidential candidates and parties is more important than ever to their voting behavior at a local level. And that is mainly a consequence of national media coverage of politics, and also a perpetual focus on the next presidential election, including the primary. Um, and it seems to me that we do now have a really good way out of that trap, which is, social media. It's direct communication with voters on their phones. As much as I hate phones, that's probably good for democracy if we can kill the stranglehold that corporate media has over politics, because it hasn't gone well in general. So, if Democrats are able to increase the profile of personal candidates over party brand, that's exactly what they're going that they need to be going for to like win the Senate long term. Yeah, and also probably House races if gerrymandering is going to keep going the way that it has gone the last 4 months.
Mhm.
And with that, it's been a great conversation. I've a lot of new thoughts to have. I appreciate you guys joining me. This was very good, very substantive, a little deeper than a lot of conversations I've had recently. So thanks for joining me, and then thanks everybody who watched us. And hopefully, you'll join us next time here on Right Now. Bye bye.
Thanks, Perry.
Thank you.